2 hours after my son was buried, the silence in our house felt violent. Not peaceful, not respectful. Violent. The air was still heavy with flowers meant to comfort the living, but only reminded me that my 8-year-old child was now underground. White petals clung to the corners of the room, crushed under shoes of relatives who had already left, carrying their sympathy back to normal lives. Mine had ended. People had said all the right things. He's with God now. He didn't suffer. You must be strong. None of it reached me. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing black, staring at a framed photo of my son, smiling, proud, holding a small sports trophy, like it was the greatest achievement in the world. His smile looked unreal now, like something borrowed from another lifetime. The doctors had called it a rare medical episode. Sudden, unavoidable, a natural end. I hadn't argued. Not because I believed them, but because grief leaves you without energy to fight lies. Outside the bedroom, my husband moved through the house like a man carved from stone. He welcomed guests, shook hands, accepted condolences. Everyone praised his strength. They said I was lucky to have such a devoted husband in a moment like this. I watched him from the half-open door as he stood speaking, with the head of my son's school foundation. They looked close, comfortable, almost rehearsed. The older man squeezed my husband's shoulder in a way that felt intimate. Something twisted in my stomach. That's when my phone started ringing. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. I glanced at the screen. Miss Vanna, my son's teacher. She had already been at the funeral. I had seen her crying, gripping a tissue like it might save her from collapsing. So why was she calling now? My fingers trembled as I answered. Hello? The voice on the other end sounded nothing like the woman I knew. Low, tight, strained. She spoke quickly, as if afraid time itself was listening. You need to come to the school, now. Please listen carefully. I can't repeat this. My chest tightened. She said she had found something. Something belonging to my son. Something left behind in his desk. And then she said the words that turned my blood cold. Don't tell anyone you're coming. Not your family. Not your husband. This is dangerous. Dangerous. I asked her what she meant, but she cut me off, her breathing uneven, like someone hiding. Teacher's lounge, second floor, come alone, she whispered. Please. The call ended. I stared at the phone long after the screen went dark. Grief had numbed me all day, but now something else rose beneath it. Sharp, instinctive, primal. The feeling that only mothers recognize. The feeling that tells you when your child is in danger, even when everyone says it's over. I wiped my face, forcing my legs to move. I told my husband I needed air, that I had a headache, that I'd left medication in the car. He offered to come with me. I said no. He looked at me with soft eyes, full of concern. The perfect grieving father. Anyone watching would have believed him without question. I drove through rain that had just begun to fall, the streets reflecting yellow light like broken glass. My thoughts raced. Why secrecy? Why fear? And why exclude my husband? Memories I'd ignored suddenly resurfaced. My son complaining of stomach pain, falling asleep in places he never used to. The way my husband insisted on managing his medicines himself. I hadn't wanted to see it, because seeing it would mean questioning everything. The school loomed ahead, dark and hollow. The gate stood open, no guard in sight. I parked far away, my heart pounding as I crossed the empty courtyard. The building seemed to absorb sound. Even my footsteps felt too loud. A thin strip of light glowed beneath the teacher's lounge door. Relief washed over me. She was there. I reached for the handle and froze. Through the narrow opening, I saw her, pressed back against the filing cabinets. Hands raised, terror etched across her face. And standing in front of her, a man in a dark shirt, broad shoulders, familiar posture, familiar scent. My husband, holding something small and black in his hand. I pushed the door. It creaked. He turned, our eyes met. And in that moment, before either of us spoke, I understood one horrifying truth. My son's funeral wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. I stepped fully into the room, facing the man I had trusted for a decade, and realized the real burial hadn't happened yet. For a few seconds, none of us moved. The teacher's lounge felt too small for all the truths threatening to surface. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, their cold glow flattening everything: faces, fear, reality. My husband reacted first. The expression on his face shifted so smoothly, it terrified me more than if he had shouted. The anger I had glimpsed a second earlier vanished, replaced by exhaustion, pain, grief. The performance was flawless. "Amara, what are you doing here?" he asked softly, as if I was the unusual element in the room. I couldn't speak. My eyes were locked on Miss Vanna. She stood rigid, her hands still raised, lips trembling, eyes wide and wet. Fear dripped off her, like sweat. No one looked like that over misplaced school supplies. I turned back to my husband. "What's going on?" I finally asked. He stepped toward me slowly, carefully, the way someone approaches a startled animal. As he moved, I saw him slide the small black object into the side pocket of his trousers. He thought I hadn't noticed. I had. "I couldn't breathe at home anymore," he said gently. Every room reminded me of him. I came to collect his things before the cleaners touched them. It sounded reasonable, thoughtful even, if I hadn't seen how Miss Vanna had been cornered. If I hadn't heard the menace in his voice earlier, I might have believed him. I searched the teacher's face, silently begging her for honesty. She hesitated. I saw him glance at her, just briefly, but the look chilled me. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet authority, a warning. Miss Vanna swallowed and nodded. "Yes," she said weakly. "We were just remembering him. That's all." I knew she was lying. Her fingers clenched the hem of her skirt so tightly her knuckles turned white. A thin line of sweat slid down her temple. Her eyes refused to meet mine. My husband rested an arm around my shoulders, squeezing just hard enough to hurt. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Let's go home." On the table beside us sat the cardboard box. Inside were my son's notebooks, crayons, a half-finished drawing, pieces of a life interrupted. And then it happened. As we turned to leave, Miss Vanna stepped close, under the excuse of adjusting my scarf. Her hands shook violently as her fingers brushed my neck. Something slipped inside the fold of my hijab. Paper. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide with desperate urgency. Her lips moved soundlessly. "Run." My heart slammed against my ribs. We walked out of the lounge, my husband's hand gripping mine possessively. I didn't look back, but I could feel Miss Vanna collapsing into the room behind us, alone again with her fear. The drive home felt longer than it had any right to be. My husband drove in silence, classical music playing low, as if grief could be drowned out by violins. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring streetlights into smeared gold. My mind raced. Why was she afraid of him? What was in that device? And what had she hidden on me? At home, the house was nearly empty. Chairs stacked, guests gone. Grief packed up and boxed away like something inconvenient. I said I needed rest. He offered to make me tea. I locked the bedroom door. Only then did I let myself collapse. My hands shook as I pulled the folded paper from my hijab. It was torn from a notebook, the handwriting rushed and uneven, as if written under pressure. I read it twice, then a third time. Your son did not die naturally. The medicine was changed. Small doses. Over time. He recorded something. Check the teddy bear. Do not confront your husband. The room spun. I sank to the floor, air ripping from my lungs. My ears rang. My skin burned. Poison. My child had been poisoned. I wiped my face hard, standing up on legs that barely held me. Crying wouldn't help now. Truth would. I crossed the hallway to my son's room and closed the door behind me. His scent still lingered. Soap, lotion, something warm and innocent. The teddy bear sat on the bed, waiting. I lifted it into my arms and noticed the stitching. Uneven. Rushed. My breath caught. I found a small tool from a drawer and worked carefully, pulling at the seam thread by thread. Inside the stuffing was a tiny recorder. My fingers hovered over the button. Then I pressed play, and my son's voice filled the room. Weak. Afraid. My tummy hurts again. Dad gave me the red medicine. My knees buckled. Then another voice entered the recording. A man's voice. Calm. Bored. I increased the dose. He won't last much longer. My husband. There was a knock at the bedroom door. Amara, he called. The handle rattled. My blood turned to ice. The truth was now alive in my hands, and the man who murdered my son was standing right outside the door.
The knocking came again, harder this time. Amara, my husband said, no softness left in his voice. Why is the door locked? I didn't answer. I stood frozen in the middle of our son's room, the small recorder clutched in my hand like a live wire. Every word I had just heard echoed in my skull. My child's weak voice, the calm cruelty of the man outside. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. The handle rattled. Open the door, he said sharply. I slipped the recorder into the inner pocket of my tunic just as his tone changed again, controlled, almost gentle. Please, he added, you're not well, let me help you. The lie slid easily from his mouth. I backed away, my spine hitting the bed. The teddy bear fell to the floor between my feet, its open seam staring up at me like a wound. Then the pounding began, not knocking, hitting. The wood shook. A framed photo rattled on the wall. Amara, he shouted, don't force me to break it. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it might betray me. He knew. Somehow he knew I had seen something. Maybe not everything, but enough. I ran, not toward the door, toward the window. My son's room was on the second floor. Outside, rain lashed the glass, and the storm had strengthened into something violent. Thunder rolled low and angry, masking the sound of the blows behind me. I threw the window open. Cold air slapped my face. The tree, one I had scolded my son for climbing countless times, stood close to the balcony, its thick branches swaying in the wind. The door cracked. Fear sharpened into decision. I climbed onto the railing, fingers slipping on wet metal, and reached for the nearest branch. The bark tore into my palms as I grabbed hold, swinging myself outward just as the bedroom door burst open behind me. I didn't look back. Fabric ripped as my clothes caught on a branch, but I dropped, scraping, sliding, gasping, until my feet slammed into wet grass. Pain shot through my ankles, but I stayed upright. Above me, I heard him shout my name. I pressed myself into the shadow of the tree trunk, breath trapped in my chest. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating the balcony above. He leaned out, searching, missed me by inches. The rain hid me. Luck, or mercy, did the rest. The moment he disappeared back inside, I ran, barefoot, blind, heart tearing itself apart. I slipped along the side of the house, mud sucking at my feet, until I reached the small service gate at the back of the garden. My fingers fumbled with the latch, slick with rain and blood. It opened. I ran into the darkness beyond. Behind me, a scream echoed through the house. Rage, panic, realization. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned and the neighborhood fell away, until streetlights gave me a road and strangers' houses blurred into shapes without meaning. Only when I reached a main avenue did I stop, collapsing beneath the awning of a closed shop. My whole body shook uncontrollably now, not from cold, but from the crash of adrenaline. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, twice, again. I didn't need to look to know who it was. 10 missed calls. I turned the phone face down and searched my contacts with trembling hands. There was only one name I trusted anymore. Khalil. My best friend since school. A journalist. Stubborn. Dangerous in the right way. He answered on the third ring. Amara? Khalil, I whispered, crouched in the shadow like prey. He killed my son. Silence. I escaped. I continued, breath shattering. I have proof. I'm on the highway near the old gas station. Please, come alone. I hung up and powered the phone off. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Every passing car made my muscles lock. Every engine sounded like his. Then, a gray sedan slowed. The window rolled down. Khalil, I sobbed. I barely remember climbing into the car. He slammed the door and drove before I could speak again. Inside the warmth of the vehicle, my shaking grew worse. I wrapped my arms around myself, clutching the recorder like a lifeline. I told him everything. Every word cost blood. He listened without interrupting, his face dark, his jaw tight. When I played the recording, he pulled over and gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. This is real, he said quietly, and it's deadly. As we drove away, the radio crackled to life. Breaking news. A woman had been found dead at an elementary school, a suspected suicide. Teacher. Initials. VS. My scream filled the car. The only witness willing to protect my son's truth was gone, and I realized my escape had started a war I might not survive. I couldn't stop screaming. The words on the radio replayed again and again in my head, each repetition sharper than the last. Teacher found dead at local elementary school. Authorities suspect suicide. No signs of forced entry. Suicide. The lie slid into place too easily. My body curled inward as if I could fold myself small enough to disappear. Miss Vanna's face flashed before me, her shaking hands, her terrified eyes, the silent way she mouthed, "Run." She had saved my life, and they killed her for it. Khalil pulled the car over to the side of the road, the engine cut off, and the sudden silence pressed in on us. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and let me break apart against his chest. I cried until my throat burned, until my chest hurt worse than when they lowered my son into the ground. "This is my fault," I sobbed. "I left her there." "No," Khalil said firmly. "Listen to me. You didn't kill her. They did." But guilt doesn't listen to logic. When the storm inside me finally quieted, something else took its place. Cold. Steady. Awake. Miss Vanna hadn't died for nothing. My son hadn't suffered in silence for nothing. I wiped my face and sat up slowly. "They think it's over," I said. Khalil looked at me. "They think I ran and broke," I continued. "They think fear will keep me quiet." He knew that look in my eyes. Journalists learn to recognize it, the moment someone stops being a victim. "Amara," he said carefully, "going after men like that gets people buried. I've already buried the only person they could hurt. I replied. They don't get to take anything else. That night, Khalil took me to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Bare walls, dusty windows, forgotten by everyone but him. It wasn't comfort, but it was invisible, and invisibility was survival. We locked the door, checked the windows, covered the camera lenses. Only then did I finally breathe. We listened to the recording again, slowly, carefully. My son's voice quivered through the speakers. My husband's voice followed, cold, casual, transactional. Khalil stopped the audio halfway through. "This proves intent," he said, "but it's not enough. They'll say it's edited, a fake. Deep audio manipulation." Hope flickered and dimmed. "We need more," he added, "something they can't explain away, something public." I nodded. That night, sleep refused to come. Every sound startled me. Every shadow felt like movement. Somewhere across the city, my husband was awake too. I could feel it, like two animals circling the same fire. By morning, we had a plan. We wouldn't run forever. We would go back. Not as wife, not as widow, as bait. I cut my hair in front of Khalil, letting black strands fall into the sink until I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I changed my clothes, flattened my voice, softened my posture, learned how to disappear inside plain sight. He handled the rest: fake credentials, a borrowed uniform, a temporary name. At dawn, I stood inside an elevator with a cleaning cart, surrounded by strangers who didn't see me at all. The building rose floor by floor, each number tightening the knot in my stomach. This was where my husband worked now, where he felt untouchable. The doors opened on his floor. Long hallways, thick carpet, heavy silence. I rolled the cart forward. His office door stood ahead, polished, guarded, respectable. Inside that room, somewhere, lay the life he thought he had secured by killing a child. If I could find proof, real proof, everything would change. I swiped the access card Khalil had prepared. Green light. The lock clicked. I entered. Photographs lined the walls. Awards. Plaques. And there, behind the desk, smiling back at me like a cruel joke, a framed family picture. My husband, my son, and me. I stared at it, my vision blurring with rage. Behind a painting on the wall, I knew there was a safe. I stepped closer, hand steady, heart screaming. I didn't know what waited inside, but I knew this: once I opened it, there would be no turning back. I placed my hand on the hidden lock, unaware that the most dangerous confession of all wasn't in the safe. The safe opened with a soft mechanical click. My breath caught. Inside were stacks of documents, property transfers, offshore account details, foundation records stamped and signed. Money trails scattered like bones after a feast, passports with unfamiliar stamps, bundles of cash wrapped with clinical precision. I photographed everything with the tiny camera Khalil had hidden in my uniform button: corruption, theft, greed, but not murder. My chest tightened. This wasn't enough. Not for Zion, not for Miss Vanna. Then I heard footsteps. Laughter. Voices drifting closer down the hallway. Panic slammed into me. I closed the safe, rehung the painting crookedly, and shoved the cleaning cart aside. My eyes scanned the room desperately before locking onto a large leather sofa near the desk. I crouched behind it, pressing myself flat, mop clenched uselessly in my hands. The door opened. My husband walked in, alive, polished, untouched by grief. And he wasn't alone. A woman followed him, heels clicking against the floor. Young, well-dressed, confident in a way wives never are. His secretary. He poured whiskey like a man celebrating. She perched on the edge of the desk, laughing softly, hair falling over one shoulder as his hand brushed her waist. I felt sick. They talked about the funeral. She praised his performance. his tears, his shaking voice, how convincing he had been. He laughed and called it necessary theater. Then he said my son's name, not gently, not even neutrally. That kid was a drain, he scoffed, always sick, always in the way. Once he was gone, everything moved faster. My vision blurred with rage. She giggled, asked about the money. It's clean now, he replied. Inheritance released, accounts unlocked, no loose ends. What about your wife? She asked casually. He shrugged. She ran. Everyone expects that. Grief does wonderful things to credibility. My fingers dug into the carpet. Then came the sentence that froze my spine. I already sent the bottle to be burned with medical waste this morning, he said. No evidence left. The bottle. Gone. A wave of despair crashed through me, but I didn't move. I didn't breathe. What I did instead was listen. Because arrogance makes men careless. They talked about trips, Europe, buying property abroad. They joked about how quickly the world forgets children, how sympathy expires. And then he said the words that sealed him. You know, he added, swirling his glass, once Sterling finishes cleaning things up, none of this ever touches us. Zion was just timing. Timing. I quietly activated the recorder in my pocket. Every word, every laugh, every confession. They kissed. I bit my knuckle to stay silent. Minutes later, they left together, too absorbed in themselves to notice the crooked painting on the wall. I counted to 100 before standing, my legs trembling violently. I placed one final object on his desk before leaving, a small toy car, my son's favorite. Then I walked out, invisible once more. Back at the apartment, Khalil listened to the audio twice in silence. When it ended, he exhaled slowly and smiled, but there was no joy in it. This, he said, they can't erase. Still, it wasn't enough. Illegal recordings could be challenged. Influence could still twist the outcome. Power protected itself. We needed something final. Public. Undeniable. Explosive. Fear. That night, Khalil hacked the smart systems inside my old home. The cameras, speakers, lights. Every detail my husband had installed to feel in control. And we gave control back, to his conscience. Lights flickered at midnight. Cold air swept through rooms that shouldn't have been cold. A child's faint laugh echoed through speakers. By night 3, he stopped sleeping. By night 4, he started drinking. By night 5, he started accusing people. When fear ripens, men make mistakes. And the biggest mistake of all was coming soon, because the Foundation's annual gala was approaching, where my husband would be honored on stage as a grieving father, and the world was about to hear the truth. They thought the worst was over. They thought fear lived only in graves. The gala glittered like nothing had ever gone wrong. Crystal chandeliers, soft music, well-dressed guests sipping drinks and exchanging practiced smiles. Every detail screamed prestige, respectability, power wrapped in elegance. I watched it all from a black van parked 2 blocks away. On the screens in front of us, cameras fed live footage from inside the hotel ballroom. Khalil worked silently beside me, fingers moving with quiet precision across his laptop. There, he said softly. My husband stepped into view. He looked thinner, sharper. The sleepless nights had begun to show. Dark circles under his eyes, tension in his jaw. But to the audience, he was still playing his role flawlessly. The grieving father, the resilient man, the hero. Mr. Sterling followed him in, smiling for cameras, greeting donors like a king inspecting his court. I felt my stomach turn. They're ready, Khalil whispered. On stage, the announcer introduced my husband as an example of strength in tragedy. Applause filled the hall. People stood. Phones came out. Sympathy poured like warm rain. My husband nodded modestly, placing his hand over his heart. He began to speak. He thanked the foundation, thanked the community, spoke of loss, of love, of carrying his son's memory forward. I barely recognized the voice. Then Khalil looked at me. Now. The lights flickered. A sharp screech cut through the speakers, forcing hands to fly to ears. Confusion rippled through the crowd. My husband froze mid-sentence, his eyes darting toward the screen behind him. The planned tribute video vanished. Instead, red text filled the screen. I know what you did. The room went silent. My husband's face drained of color. Then the audio played. His voice. Clear. Unfiltered. That kid was a drain. Once he was gone, everything moved faster. Gasps exploded across the ballroom. Phones dropped. A woman screamed. The recording continued. The talk of poison, of money, of timing. My husband lunged for the microphone, shouting that it was fake, a setup. But nobody listened. Cameras were everywhere now, broadcasting panic live. I already sent the bottle to be destroyed. His voice echoed again. People backed away from him physically, like his guilt was contagious. Then Mr. Sterling stood. "This is nonsense," he barked. "Security." My husband turned on him. Panic shattered composure. "You told me to do it," he screamed. "You promised protection. The poison was your idea." The ballroom erupted. That accusation, raw, spontaneous, real, was the final nail. Khalil captured everything, every word, every betrayal, every second. Security rushed the stage. Journalists surged forward like sharks. Sterling's face twisted in fury and terror as he realized something awful. He had been exposed and abandoned. My husband fled through a side exit, shoving people aside, the applause long dead behind him. But exposure wasn't justice yet. It was only pressure. And pressure, Khalil said quietly, already typing, creates cracks. That night, we sent 2 messages. One to Sterling, posing as my husband. One to my husband, posing as Sterling. Both demanded a secret meeting at an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Both promised escape. Both threatened destruction. At 2 a.m., rain hammered the empty harbor. Hidden microphones recorded everything. Sterling arrived first, armed, shaking with fury. My husband arrived minutes later, desperate, disoriented, unraveling. They didn't greet each other. They attacked. Words spilled. Accusations. Confessions. "You pushed me to increase the dose. You fed it to him. You wanted the inheritance. Don't pretend you're innocent." The microphones caught it all. When Sterling raised the gun, police sirens cut through the rain. Chaos exploded. They fought. They fell. And when the officers stormed in, guns raised, commands shouted, there was no mystery left. Only 2 men confessing to the murder of a child in their own voices. I watched it unfold from the van, my hands shaking. Not with fear this time, but with release. Because the hunt was over. Or so I thought. I believed the truth had finally trapped him. I was wrong. Sirens cut through the rain like wounded animals. Red and blue lights spilled across the warehouse walls, flashing against rusted metal and slick concrete. Officers rushed in from every entrance, shouting commands, weapons raised. I should have felt relief. Instead, a deep, panicked instinct told me something was wrong. On the screens inside the van, Khalil leaned closer. His jaw tightened. "He's not surrendering," he muttered. Through the chaotic feed, I saw my husband break free. Sterling lay groaning on the floor, blood seeping from a cut above his eye. But my husband, fueled by terror and desperation, ran. He shoved past crates, slipped through a side exit, and disappeared into the storm outside the warehouse. My heart lurched. "He's armed?" I asked. "We don't know," Khalil replied. "But he's cornered. Cornered animals don't think. They destroy. Police units split up. Some secured Sterling, others sprinted after my husband. The docks erupted into movement, engines starting, boots splashing through puddles, radios crackling with shouted coordinates. Then a message flashed on Khalil's screen. Stolen vehicle, black SUV, headed north. My blood ran cold. That's his, I whispered. Before Khalil could stop me, I opened the van door. Amara, wait. He knows where to find me, I said. He always has. Minutes later, squad cars tore through the streets, headlights slicing the rain. We followed at a distance, watching the nightmare unfold through police radio chatter. My husband drove like a man with nothing left. Red lights were suggestions, corners were insults. He clipped mirrors, fishtailed through intersections, sideswiped a truck hard enough to send sparks flying. I pressed my hands together, praying, not for him, but for everyone he might hit. He's heading toward the overpass, an officer's voice shouted through the radio. Khalil's breath hitched. That bridge isn't finished, he said. I knew it. Concrete barriers, raw edges, a half-built stretch suspended above a dark river swollen with rain. We reached the scene seconds after impact. The SUV had smashed sideways into a retaining wall. The front end crumpled like paper. Steam hissed from the hood. Sirens screamed in every direction. I saw him stumble out, bleeding, limping, one leg bent wrong at the knee. Even injured, he didn't stop. He spotted me. Recognition twisted his face into pure hatred. He grabbed me. His hands locked around my scarf, yanking me backward with violent force. Pain exploded across my scalp as the fabric tightened around my throat. I stumbled, nearly falling, before he dragged me toward the open edge of the bridge. Don't move, officers shouted. Drop her. He ignored them. A shard of broken glass pressed against my neck. My pulse thudded violently beneath it. Stay back, he screamed, or she goes over. Rain soaked us both. His breath came in ragged bursts, smelling of blood and alcohol. I felt calm, strangely calm. This was the face of the man who poisoned his son, the man who believed power made him untouchable. Below us, the river roared. Helicopter, he demanded. Money, route out, or she dies. The negotiator's voice tried soothing tones. Promise time, options, all lies. He knew it. So did I. His injured leg shook beneath him. Blood pooled around his shoe, the rain turning it pink as it washed across the concrete. That was his weakness. I inhaled slowly. Then I bit him. Hard. My teeth sank into his forearm, tasting blood and metal and rage. He screamed, jerking back in shock. At the same time, I drove my knee into his damaged leg. There was a sound, wet and final. He collapsed, howling, glass skittering across the pavement. I stumbled away, choking, gasping, free. Police surged forward. Weapons clattered. Hands pulled me back as others tackled him to the ground. He fought like a demon until a gunshot ended it. A controlled shot to immobilize him permanently. Silence followed. Broken only by rain and heavy breathing, they wrapped me in a blanket. A medic pressed gauze to the cut on my neck. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, our eyes met one last time. No anger, no power, only fear. And for the first time, he understood. There was no escape. They took him away in chains, broken and screaming. Morning arrived without mercy. The rain had stopped, but the city looked bruised, as if it too had been dragged through the night. I sat wrapped in a thermal blanket inside the back of an ambulance, staring at hands that no longer trembled. Shock had replaced fear. They told me my neck wound was shallow. They told me I was lucky. None of it registered. Across the road, I saw him, my husband, strapped to a stretcher, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood soaking through bandages. Police surrounded him as if he might still escape. He wouldn't. Not anymore. Khalil appeared beside me, his arm in a temporary sling, face bruised, eyes burning with fury and relief. He didn't speak at first. He just sat down and let me lean against him. For the first time since my son died, I cried without breaking. Not screams, not collapse, just quiet tears, heavy and endless. The news cycle exploded before noon. Footage from the gala, audio from the warehouse, photos from the bridge. Everything went public at once. The story wasn't whispered anymore. It screamed. A foundation executive and grieving father arrested in connection with the murder of an 8-year-old child. The word poison appeared again and again. The teacher's name followed shortly after. Her death reclassified as homicide pending investigation. Public outrage boiled over. Vigils formed outside the school. Flowers piled higher than they had at the funeral. Too late for her. Still necessary. By evening, both men were under guard in separate hospital wings. My husband's leg had worsened overnight. Infection. The rain-soaked wounds, glass, asphalt, all had done their work. Doctors spoke calmly, carefully. They used the word amputation. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not satisfaction, not pity. Only symmetry. While my son's small body had shut down piece by piece under poison, his father would now wake without part of his own. Pain doesn't restore balance, but reality has its own language. 2 days later, Khalil sat beside me in a quiet waiting area, scrolling through court updates on his phone. All assets frozen, he read. Foundation under investigation. Sterling suffered a stroke during questioning. I closed my eyes. Sterling, the man who had planned everything with contracts and smiles, was now paralyzed on one side, speech slurred, power stripped. Alive, but ruined. My husband survived surgery. He screamed when he woke. The judge denied bail. They moved him to the prison hospital under armed supervision. 1 week later, I was asked to come identify evidence. Walking down the hallway toward his room felt unreal. Glass walls reflected a woman I barely recognized. Thinner, quieter, harder. Inside, he sat in a wheelchair. Smaller than I remembered. Weaker. When he saw me, his mouth opened and tears filled his eyes instantly. His lips moved, begging. I didn't step closer. I didn't step away. I just stood there until he realized something worse than hatred filled my silence. Nothing. No forgiveness, no rage, no fear, emptiness. The judge returned with the final ruling a month later. Aggravated murder of a minor, murder of a witness, fraud, money laundering, maximum sentence. Sterling received life imprisonment. My husband received death. Gasps filled the courtroom. He collapsed screaming. I didn't react. When the gavel struck, something sealed inside my chest. Not healing, but closure. That night, I dreamed of my son. Not sick, not weak, but laughing, running, free. 6 months passed. Time didn't erase pain, but it blunted its edges. I moved into a smaller home. Quieter, safer. With Khalil's help, I redirected every recovered penny of my father's inheritance into something new, a place for children no one believed. We named it Zion's House. And on the day it opened, as children's laughter filled the courtyard, I felt something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Purpose. Loss took everything from me. But in the quiet that followed justice, I discovered what resurrection actually looks like. The cemetery was quiet that evening. Not silent. Quiet in the way living places become when pain has already passed through them and moved on. The wind brushed gently over the grass, carrying the soft scent of flowers left by strangers who had learned my son's name without ever knowing his face. Zion and Miss Vanna rested beneath a tall magnolia tree, side by side. I had chosen it intentionally. They had both tried to protect the truth. And both had paid for it. I knelt in front of Zion's headstone, tracing the carved letters with my fingers. For the first time since his death, the weight in my chest didn't crush me. It pressed, but it no longer suffocated. "It's over," I whispered. "They can't hurt anyone anymore." I talked to him the way I used to at bedtime. Soft, patient, honest. I told him what we built with the money meant to destroy him, about the children now sleeping safely under one roof, about how his name would be spoken not with sorrow, but with purpose. Behind me, Khalil waited. He had learned when to speak and when not to. He never rushed my grief, never filled silence for comfort. That patience had saved me more than once. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and amber. Then I felt something, a warmth. I lifted my head. Down the gravel path just beyond the low fence, I saw a small figure, a boy. He stood in the glow of the evening light, wearing pajamas printed with a superhero he once loved more than anything. His hair was messy, his smile bright, healthy, whole. Zion. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I stood, slowly, my heart pounding not with fear, but recognition. He lifted his hand and waved. A simple gesture, a goodbye. For the first time, tears streamed down my face without pain. I returned the wave, my hand shaking, my smile breaking free after months of practice. "I know," I whispered. "I know." The wind stirred the magnolia leaves. His silhouette faded gently with the light, dissolving not into darkness, but into peace. I stood there long after he was gone. Khalil approached quietly, standing beside me without questions. We walked away together, leaving the graves in the care of shadows and flowers and memory. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time in months. Life didn't reset, but it moved forward. Zion's house grew quickly. Volunteers came, teachers, therapists, children whose stories felt painfully familiar. I learned how to listen without breaking, how to be strong without becoming cruel, how to honor grief without living inside it. Justice had taken its course. But healing, real healing, was something else entirely. Months later, standing in the courtyard of the home we built, I watched kids race across the grass, laughing so loudly it echoed against the walls. Laughter again. Not a replacement, a continuation. I placed my hand over my heart and spoke his name once more, without bitterness, without desperation. Just love, unbroken. Some stories end in justice, others end in peace. People often ask what comes after justice. They imagine relief, celebration, a clean ending where pain dissolves the moment a judge speaks the final sentence. They're wrong. Justice doesn't heal you. It only gives you space to breathe. The real work begins afterward, when the noise fades, when the crowds move on to new tragedies, and you're left alone with memories that no prison sentence can erase. Some nights, I still wake up reaching for a child who isn't there. Some mornings, I still pause before calling out his name. Grief doesn't vanish. It changes shape. At Zion's house, the children wake up early. Some scream from nightmares. Some refuse to speak. Some watch adults with eyes too old for their age. I recognize myself in them. I kneel beside beds. I sit on the floor. I don't promise things I can't guarantee. I tell them one truth instead. You're safe now. And slowly, day by day, they begin to believe it. One afternoon, a little boy tugged my sleeve and asked, "Did your kid get better?" I crouched to his height. "He changed the world," I said. And somehow, that felt honest. Khalil still visits often. He never claims credit, never speaks of bravery. He jokes, complains about paperwork, drinks bad coffee, and stays when the quiet gets heavy. Some friendships are built through laughter. Others are forged in storms. Ours survived both. Occasionally, reporters try to reopen the story. They want quotes, headlines, closure for audiences who watched the tragedy unfold like entertainment. I decline. My son was not a headline. He was a heartbeat. In prison, my husband waits. He no longer writes letters. I heard he stopped asking for forgiveness, not because he found peace, but because silence finally taught him what powerlessness feels like. As for the man who helped him, Sterling never recovered his speech. His lawyers speak for him now. His wealth dissolved into fines, lawsuits, restitution. The system that protected them became the one that crushed them. Balance rarely feels fair, but sometimes it exists. On quiet evenings, I return to the cemetery. I sit beneath the magnolia tree and let the wind breathe through the branches. I don't look for visions anymore. I don't need them. Love doesn't disappear when a body does. It transforms into action, into protection, into legacy. I once believed my life ended the day my son was buried. I know now that was wrong. Something else was born that day. Not strength, purpose. If you're listening to this story and you're still standing in the middle of your own nightmare, hear this. Survival doesn't mean forgetting. Healing doesn't mean forgiving the unforgivable. And moving forward doesn't betray the ones you lost. It honors them. Zion didn't get the future he deserved, but because of him, others will. And that is how love defeats cruelty. Not loudly, not quickly, but permanently. Some lives end too soon. Some truths arrive too late. But when courage meets persistence, even the darkest stories can leave behind a light. If this story moved you, tell me which city you're listening from. Your presence matters more than you know. We'll meet again in the next story.